everyone who goes onto YouTube. My name is Georgie Fenn and I run a wine blog called Wining Away the Weekend. Talk to you, it's been a while, so there are a few to get through, including some spirits. It's a very busy time of year. May especially is when there are all these sort of spring portfolio tastings on, from wholesalers to retailers to supermarkets. They're all going, come and try our wines, tell everyone what you think is great. I don't actually live in London, so I do have to be a bit picky about what I go to. And I have just been to the Waitrose spring tasting, and I've been to a couple of retailer ones as well. At the last autumn Waitrose tasting, I found the most amazing £5.99 wine, which you may have already tried, the Pinot Noir from Meunier. And my goal was to find something equally special and in that sort of bracket again, and I feel I have. So without further ado, this is Sous, Soleil, Under the Sun, perfectly named, or very aptly named, for this time of year, especially today. It's very warm. It's £5.99 and it is a Merlot from France. So when I started drinking wine many years ago, before I was actually really interested in wine, I drank Merlot, and I drank an awful lot of Merlot, and I think it's a very approachable grape because it's so fresh and fruity and quite a generous grape. So there's not so many heavy tannins, it's not going to sort of dry your mouth out. It also goes with a lot of different foods. I then went through a patch where I didn't know very much about wine, but I started getting into wine, where I stopped drinking Merlot because I thought it wasn't very good. I think I also maybe got put off because sometimes if you have a Merlot in a pub, it's a bit warm and you can sort of be put off by the abundance of fruit, and you do tend up to wake up with a bit of a hangover. So I'm actually going to pour myself a glass of this now. There's also a screw cap, so that's always handy. I went to watch the Queen's Jubilee celebration at Windsor on Thursday, and I actually had my corkscrew taken off me on the way in. Thankfully I have lots more, but that was a bit upsetting. I thought, I wish I'd hidden that. I don't know what they expected me to do with my corkscrew, but Sous, Soleil, Merlot from France. It's a Pays d'Oc wine, £5.99, can't go wrong. I'm just going to check I do still like it. Don't know how many I did swallow at the tasting, but you never know. Yes, it's a really good wine. It's actually got some really lovely acidity there. I'm really happy with that one. So while we're on Waitrose, I just wanted to talk about one of my favourite rosé offerings that they have. Now, I have a lot of favourite rosés and I'm very fickle. I will tell you that Domaine Tempier is my favourite of all time, but I also, I'm a bit of a hoarder. I hoard it, so it's in my cellar because it's a rosé that actually ages, and then I worry that maybe I'll never experience age on a rosé if I just keep drinking it, which is a problem. So I'm trying to hide it from myself and drink other rosés, one of which is Le Bijou by Sophie Valrose, which doesn't sound that French when I say it. So this is another IGP wine similar to the Merlot, but anyway, out of all of the rosés at Waitrose, there's Le Bijou. I mean, there are so many now. They do this in a lovely half bottle as well, which is very handy for handbags. It's just really delicious, and the little half bottle is £6.99, so I think this is about £12 most of the time. It's often on offer. Out of the broad spectrum of rosés these days, where you get this sort of overly dry, and they call it a cut and paste style, this really stood out for me, that it still had lots of pretty fruit there. So it's very fashionable looking still, with its lovely silver label, and it's very pale. It is dry, but there is a real softness to it too, like strawberries and cream kind of softness. It's also got a lovely story on the back. The reason it's called Le Bijou de Sophie Valrose, this lovely story, and why it's sort of attributed to Sophie Valrose. The legend speaks of a woman who stood up and challenged this exploitation, Sophie Valrose. Inspired by her story, Bijou is a tribute to her memory. It is an authentic dry rosé produced with hand-picked grapes from low-yielding bush vines, like those Sophie harvested many years ago. Moving on to Tesco next. Tesco have really upped their game when it comes to wine. I was so excited to see that they are selling a Ken Forrester wine, especially this. So this is the Misfits. It's a Cinsault 2021 vintage. You can see the label, it's a bit stained because, well, I've had it. So Ken Forrester is renowned for his wines out of South Africa. And if you don't know that South Africa produce amazing wines, they do. It's this wine in open fermentation with wild yeast, which isn't that unusual, but it kind of is when you see a wine in a supermarket. They also experimented with leaving some stems on and removing the stems from other grapes. So there's a bit of a jumble in there of all sorts going on. Stems add a sort of savoury note. If you can imagine eating fruit, stems are going to just make things a bit more bitter in a way. So when you leave stems in a wine, you're kind of just adding a complex layer of a bit more structure and maybe some savoury notes on top of the abundance of fruit. For a wine like this, I think it's really beneficial because it just gives it that edge of kind of, like a little bit of a draw you back from the edge of it being too fruity. So it's £9 from Tesco, and that's the Misfits Cinsault. The next wine is also from Tesco, this time at the slightly pricier end of the spectrum, but I think worth every single penny. So this is called Petaluma, and it is a Chardonnay from the Adelaide Hills sorry, I'm really bad at accents, from Australia. So I think it's hand harvested in March because their season obviously is very different to our season. Undergoes malolactic fermentation as well, and that is where they convert the malic acid into lactic acid, which you will have heard of. And just sort of when you see malolactic fermentation on a label, sometimes people can be a bit like, well, why are you telling me that? But what it does do is it softens any sort of high acidity and gives it quite a creamy texture, a bit like, think malolactic, think of milk, think of cream. And you will get this more of a creamy flavour, especially with Chardonnays. It's been aged in oak barrels, so there's also that lovely, soft, buttery Chardonnay deliciousness that I am slightly obsessed with. So it is £16, so perhaps pricier end of the spectrum, but I think really worth it and worth splashing out on to enjoy in your leisure. Chardonnay of this calibre goes really well with anything garlicky because it's quite a sort of strong flavour. You want to go with strong flavours to pair with it, but equally if you're cooking or you're ordering pizza, you'd be doing well with it. I have a friend who is completely and utterly addicted to dark horse Chardonnay, and she drinks it with every single meal. Like, she'll try whatever I take over, but she will eventually revert back to dark horse Chardonnay, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is, you don't need to let food pairing interfere with what you enjoy. So try it, and then maybe don't eat at all because you'll be enjoying it so much. That's terrible advice. Don't do that. I wanted to talk to you about Gusbourne. So this fantastic labelling is a lovely English brand. And Gusbourne is down in East Sussex, and I visited there maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, in September. I had a lovely time. I took my doggies, I went on a solo adventure, and I stayed in Rye, which I arrived in and I was like, wow, there's a really weird, and I'm not this sort of person that would be like, oh, it's haunted, or I arrived in Rye and I was like, okay, I think this place is haunted. And I walked around and it got creepier as I went, but not in a disconcerting way. In fact, it was kind of quite, there was something quite reassuring about how creepy it was. But I then Googled, and there, lo and behold, on the Daily Mail, it was people stay in Rye to see if they can see the pirates from the former days. Gusbourne is one of my absolute favourites, and it's beautiful. They have built this thing called the Nest, which is their tasting room. And you can either have a picnic out on the lawn, or you can sit on a bench and do a tasting. You can walk around the vineyard. I took the dogs for a long walk. We got a bit lost, but we had a lovely time. And I don't know whether it's probably not allowed, and it probably is slightly frowned upon, but I did try the grapes on my way around because we were in September, verging on picking time. So I just picked the occasional one off, one that didn't look like it was too necessary in the winemaking process. And what shocked me was how much those grapes then tasted the same, and I know this sounds really silly, in the wine. And this is what's really important, and it's a debate that happens in wine quite a lot. How important is it for a wine to have an identity? So there are these amazing people in the wine industry. I'm not one of them yet. I hope to be one day. And they can blind taste. So for example, they could taste this and they'd be like, well, obviously this one's not that hard, but it's a Merlot from France and it's IGP, so it's not sort of that specific. But for example, there are people out there who can try a wine out of a glass and tell you the exact village it came from. And that's quite important. It's very important that a wine maintains its identity. And the way they are sort of learning how to do that is by just not interfering too much in the winemaking process and letting the grapes speak for themselves. Gusbourne are brilliant at doing that because there is this slight spice in their Pinot Meunier. It sort of reminds me of curry, but in a lovely way. It's this sort of warmth and it's really aromatic. And when I tried their Blanc de Noir, which is only red grapes, I was like, wow, that's just like the grape I've picked off your vine in a glass form in a wine. So I'm very excited about them having a Pinot Meunier still wine. So this is from 2020 because if you remember 2020, it was a very warm year. So they won't be making it when a year where it's not been very warm like last year because the grapes won't have got ripe enough to produce a still wine. So this you can buy directly from Gusbourne's website. It's £29. You know what? I will try it now. I'm cooking this lovely recipe actually while we're on it, just a quick interlude of wine while I finish my glass. And I will talk to you a little bit about food. So I am hugely passionate about cooking, mostly because I love eating, which I think is the reason most people love cooking, surely. I mean, the two and two go hand in hand. One of the accounts that I would recommend you look up is the Culinary Bee on Instagram. She comes up with recipes and she also cooks for people. She takes the most fantastic photography of food, and if anyone's tried to get a photo of something they've cooked at home, you will realise how difficult it is to photograph food well. Like, it's such an art. And she does everything from macarons to what I've cooked tonight, which is chicken kebabs. And they are fail-safe. I have not had a bad meal that I've cooked from her Instagram. They are so tasty and, you know, pretty straightforward. Right, let's get this open. The trouble is with this cellar floor is there's not actually many areas of it that are flat. So putting things down is quite scary. They did really well. Tanglewood, who helped me install this racking, it's all made to measure, and they managed to make it so that it just fitted the whole cellar all around the edge. And somehow it's so sturdy, and it's also mold resistant because it's very damp down here. Okay, so you might think, why is she not rinsing her glass? But I mean, down in the cellar, guys, there is actually a tap, but the chances of it still working are slim. Okay, so first things first, I think if you can see this, the colour is very pretty. It does go quite well with the branding. So Pinot Meunier is named because the grapes, Meunier means miller, or kind of, well, that's what it means in French. And it's because a miller, obviously a person who makes flour, and it's because the little Pinot Meunier grapes are covered in this sort of white dust. So they look like they're scattered in flour. Brad Greatix told me that from High Timber, and it's one of those facts I've actually managed to retain. So it's a funny little grape. It's only often in small quantities in champagne and English sparkling. So it's quite nice that it's allowed to have its own moment for change. Briefly, to go through how you would taste the wine by the book. You don't have to do this. You're meant to look at it, check for faults. Was it cloudy? Is it clear? How like sort of dense is it? What colour is it? Red, ruby, garnet, brown, tinged, before you smell. Okay, so this is what makes me so happy. So it just smells of Gusbourne. I mean, blindfold me in a room and I probably wouldn't have this confidence, but that just reminds me of my lovely trip with my doggies, walking around the vineyards, trying grapes, getting told off for being in the wrong fields. It smells, it's just this lovely, so you have that really concentrated, almost blueberry note, where it's not quite red fruit because it's a bit more sweet almost. But then there's this warmth, which is from this sort of spice. And it's just really a lovely intoxicating smell. Okay, so I'm doing this a lot, and I know it's really annoying and a bit wanky, but it's just to try and get the aromas out of the glass. That's all. My mum hates it. My dad actually couldn't watch a tasting once because he said it was so annoying. Okay, right, I'm ready to try it, guys. 29 pounds of Pinot Meunier. That's so interesting. It's really, and also another thing that's frowned upon in wine at the minute for some unknown reason is saying fresh, but there is no other word to describe this. It's so fresh. If I was blindfolded, I don't know if I wouldn't tell it was an apple juice. Like, it's got this lovely acidity. It's fantastic. It's orchard fresh. It's it's yummy. It doesn't taste alcoholic, weirdly. It's got a really lovely acidity. It really settles on the tongue. And then it's really appley. Interesting. It's really delicious, actually, and I think it will go well tonight with my chicken skewers, which is exciting. Very well made wine. I couldn't fault it at all. Finally, I wanted to talk to you about some spirits. For those of you that do follow my wine blog on Instagram, you may know that I have quite a thing for nudes. Not of myself, it's not like an OnlyFans. I'm just very into artwork of mostly female forms. This branding, and this is a gin. And I don't drink an awful lot of gin, but I do drink a lot of Negronis. It's fig leaf gin, and it's got this fantastic dancing, naked, fig leaf happy women with their bottoms out and their breasts out, of all sizes, shapes and colours. And this is from Daylesford Organic, which is the best place. And also dangerous. Their candles, as a side note, are incredible. Some candles you buy and you're like, oh, it doesn't actually smell once I've lit it. Their candles will smell out your whole house, and they're actually really good value. But onto the gin. So it's fig leaf and bergamot. This I want to wear. Unfortunately, I can't, and I have to drink it. I mean, give me enough and I might end up wearing a little bit. But yes, I just thought I'd tell you about it because it's so fun. I will absolutely be one of those people who either puts flowers in it afterwards or lights. I'm not throwing that away. The artwork is by Hugo Guinness, and yeah, it's just the most fantastic. It's from Cornwall. It's a Cornish gin, and it's just brilliant. I love it. It makes me want to drink more gin, and by itself, well, not by itself, but with tonic. I am a big fan of the blue one, Mediterranean, a Fever Tree one. It's just sublime. So yeah, new fan of fig leaf gin. I should also just mention how much it is, I guess. I checked online at this, and I must have been feeling quite bougie this day. It's £45, but you do get the art. So technically it's an investment. But yeah, I would buy it again, so I could have two, maybe either side of something. It's very cool. Next up, you know I mentioned I drink Negronis. So I love Negronis, but I like a small Negroni. I don't like to sort of be overpowered with the bitterness. And I did a post about them around Easter time, asking people for their advice on how to sort of change up the Negroni experience and how I could make it better. And there was a lot of talk about improving your gin, improving your vermouth, and really improve on bitters. But Martini is obviously the go-to vermouth, and I saw this one in Waitrose. It's called Fiero, so it's all of the sort of standard mixture of wine situation going on, but this has got botanicals and Spanish orange peel in it as well. I really enjoyed it. It's just a lot more fragrant and it's slightly sweeter. So that's now my Negroni go-to mixer. This is only £12, which when you're only having a 50ml amount of over a week, jokes, is actually, I think, really good value. All the news I have to update you on for now, and cheers. Do let me know how you get on.